there is quality of service that basically networks can offer to end users and to services, then basically these services will be more and more prevalent. So I would basically say with HTML5 and basically things that we are doing in the network, we will be able to see a lot more cloud-based services in the next
anything super specific around cloud-based prediction?
You're talking about the way people consume content, right? It will basically be very much available in cloud, and basically from enterprise to consumer, we'll see a whole range of services. That's it.
Okay. Thanks.
So I can riff on that a little bit. The things that I see, obviously acceleration of the things that we're seeing today, cloud computing is an obvious one, and all of the things that go along with that, whether it's on the edge or in cloud infrastructure. The other thing that I think we'll see a lot more of is integration, federation, or integration is a better word. The various screens that you have, whether it's your PC or your home, your living room, your smartphone, it's still a little hard to manage all that. We have to do a lot of that. It doesn't just work yet, so there's a lot of work that needs to happen there. And one that's sort of a pet peeve for me is identity. Identity is a difficult one right now. We haven't solved it yet. I don't know if we're going to solve it in the next 18 months, but that's one that I'd like to be able to. I mean, I look at my wife's computer and I can see the sticky notes all over her flat screen. It shows all the various usernames and passwords that she has to remember. We haven't solved that problem. It's an obvious one. We need to get there. And I'm hoping that I'll be able to use my devices as my identity. So,
yeah, that one you mentioned about 3 screens, I mean, it would be great, obviously, just have a whole 45-minute session on that and how it's going to work, how is mobile going to integrate with the PC and the TV. Big one. So, who's next?
So, one of the, and I always refer back to my wireline experience because I think there's a lot to be learned from there. One of the things that we have seen a lot of from the early days of broadband through till today is the fact that we're getting hacked a lot. You may not realize it, but your home's DSL router, whatever cable modem router, is being hacked every day, and you don't know about it, or you don't pay enough attention. But if you do go and look at the security logs, you'll find all kinds of attacks on your home. Your PC is one step away from that. It wasn't the case sometime back when we initially were naive enough to connect ourselves directly to the internet. But now no one does that, and we're starting that same path with the faster data services and all, and trying to put a lot of our compute attributes on our smartphones and all our whatever iPads and so on. We're going to get hacked, and there's no denying that. But is this the time when we start seeing those network-based firewall services that were a dream, in the wired world for a long time and never actually took effect enough that people make money off of them?
So the prediction is vulnerability, and there's going to be a huge response to it.
Right. Huge response in 2 senses. One, what you do on the phone itself or your smart device, and one is what the service provider does for you. And I think if you start running antivirus stuff on your phone, whoever's complaining about battery life, you're going to see much less battery life. So we're going to need battery life technology.
So my prediction is in about 18 months, we will be in the middle of a mobile cloud platform war. Right now we're having a mobile OS platform war, whether it's Symbian or Migo from Nokia, Windows Phone 7, iOS, Android, Palm, etc. And a lot of people out there who are software developers have to think, how do I make an application? What platforms do I do, etc.? What's my business model? I expect all of the manufacturers are going to take this out also into the cloud. So you will have Google promoting their cloud services. You'll have Apple doing the same. Nokia has its OV services. I expect you'll see more. Also, what happens with Facebook? Facebook will want to try to capture more mobile assets. That they're already saying that they see much more posts by mobile users than by non-mobile users. So I expect that will come more will have the same thing around carriers. As carriers start to deploy IMS and other cloud-based services, they will also be a factor in all of this, and it will become relatively complicated for especially smaller startups to figure out how to deploy things in the cloud.
So a big build out of cloud services, cloud wars. Yeah. This is a great panel. You guys are very lucky. We're going to ask a lot of questions now, and I encourage you to meet up with people afterwards because you're going to get some great input from them and direct insight. And I want to actually open up the audience questions in respect to Mr. Traeger, I think, regarding the question on spectrum. You want to ask that again as a great question? What do you have in mind?
Louis Traeger with Comp Daily. There's been a lot of emphasis in the real world and already in the discussion about what's called an impending spectrum shortage. I tried to pose an open-ended question about any particular insights you have that you think haven't been made clear in the discussion already. One question I wonder is, how do carriers and other players in this discussion, the analogy that leaps to mind, however good it is security. When security vendors talk about the end of the world and threats, it's sort of caveat emptor, I think. How do people in the mobile industry establish everybody always wants more real estate. How do you establish the credibility of the claims about the crunch without looking like Chicken Little, if that's even a problem? I mean, maybe you've already sold this to all the policymakers sufficiently already.
Is that sufficient? Yeah, John.
I can start. So the other thing that you also have to mix into this is also local areas. You will have different spectrums in different countries and different spectrum allocation policies. At least for us in Nokia, that becomes complicated because if you want to make one phone, you will have to be, talking the local dialect, so to speak, of the spectrum or the different frequencies that get allocated. And I don't think that's a long-term sustainable way of working. When I was working at Nokia Research Center, we did a lot of work around cognitive radio or software-defined radio, and there is still a lot of work that needs to be done there, but I think that will become more and more common. What cognitive radio is essentially having a sort of meta radio protocol that you can negotiate spectrum based upon the availability, and then negotiate off to a different part of the spectrum for what is needed. That will help when spectrum is getting scarce. I think that will come, but I would say that's probably post 2015.
Are we getting at the part of that question, by the way?
I would like to add to that is that basically, if you look at this way we are looking at this particular problem, we are doing a lot of innovation around RAN, right, with the radio access network. We try to introduce a lot of components that will improve how much of coverage we can give to the users, as well as how much of data we can carry across the radio spectrum. Of course, we are doing a lot of upgrade in terms of backhaul and everything else. But there is a theoretical limit, right, in terms of how much of data you can send over the spectrum, 20 megahertz spectrum, or whatever range that you're talking about. And that is basically the science of it. And so what we have to do is basically add one more base stations to actually increase the capacity. And second one is from a coverage perspective, basically have antennas in very wide area of cities that we want to cover. But there are all kinds of regulatory hazards, right? In terms of actually putting up the antenna. So from a radio network perspective, spectrum is one component. It is an important component for us as we go into LTE and as we have video type of services that's coming on board. We will see a lot of demand, and the problem for us is demand is going to outstrip supply in any way we look at it from a mobile data perspective, and that's basically, so adding more spectrum would definitely help.
You guys want to ask more questions? There's a gentleman down here who'll take next. Go ahead.
Hi, I think I came across a presentation from Nokia or something that said over the next 10 years to meet the demand for data bandwidth, it would have to be about a 5x growth in spectrum and about 10x growth in number of base stations, number of cells. So do the carriers, do carriers see opportunities for monetization and earning revenues from all this? Interesting enough opportunities that they'll be investing in this, or are there problems?
That's a great concrete question.
I mean, there's an ongoing debate going around in terms of this particular very specific issue. Susan pointed about, having revenue proportional to the investment in terms of capital expenditure, both in terms of buying more spectrum, putting in more base stations, adding more backhaul. So this is really a problem that will have to be solved for us to make a lot of investment, not just Orange but all operators in general. And there's a very clear agreement, there's a clear agreement among operators at least, that this has to happen for us to continue to invest heavy billions of dollars that we invest in terms of infrastructure. So coming back to the data tsunami that we are seeing, we're seeing tiered pricing approach, right, as one of the things that we will, and our CEO mentioned it, and there's a lot of operators who have mentioned that tiered pricing would come. And so if you ask about 18 months prediction, you're already seeing it here in the US, and you see that in Europe. But that's one part of it. But the second part of it,
I'm sorry to interrupt, but that's just a quick check. That was great. I love that question because it's a concrete question. Is it a concrete enough answer?
Right.
Or is it around the right track?
I was looking for some good ideas that.
Right. I mean, so tiered pricing is one way we are looking at it, and so that's the way we could basically monetize our investment in terms of more infrastructure. So the second part of it that we are seeing is basically services which are consumer electronics based, like Kindle as well as end-to-end type of traffic, where basically it's not unlimited data. You get revenue proportional to the data that is being sent.
Okay, makes sense.
So one of the issues I think really hangs around the charging model. And I think that if you use things like Femto's Wi-Fi offload, that kind of small cell in a mall model, to reuse spectrum and more efficiently make use of that same spectrum over the same geographic area, it's not clear who pays for what. And UMA was another example of where it wasn't clear who paid for the phone call when you switched from your Wi-Fi at home to you went out of the home and into a macro cell. Who paid for it? If you switched the other way, who paid for it? And I think some of these questions really have to be answered satisfactorily to both the wireline provider who's providing the offload in places where it's possible, so that the wireless world can be effective also. And there's got to be some kind of tariff and agreement across that boundary, which hasn't really been in place. And that's why reuse of spectrum, I think, is not so much do we have the technology as much as it is a policy problem. And I think the other aspect of that was security, because as you move from one area where you know that you're on a wireless network and you know where you got your security from, to another area where you're in a femto or a small cell or a Wi-Fi region, you don't know who's providing that security and are there contractual obligations. So that's another big issue you have to deal with.
So just giving some more practical comments, I think I'm a technological optimist. I think that we have an immense amount of smart people working on these things, and that there are solutions in many circumstances. As the devices get to be smarter, they get to use the spectrum more efficiently. We will have MIMOSA will have additional antennas on the devices. There's been an amazing amount of innovation around just the design of antennas on mobile devices.